So you did end up becoming a born again Christian. Was that how far into your transition back to being male was that? Because I know you lost your due to the inclinations you had to be female. You did have a family, and that ended up consuming you, and then you lost that marriage and that nucleus. But so what? How far into your sorry,
Deep,
I'm losing my words.
deep transition.
Yes, thank you. How far into your detransition, how into being Walt again,
Yeah,
did you find Christ? Because I know you married a lovely woman.
yeah.
Was it within this marriage that you found Christ, or?
Well, I found Christ before we got married,
Oh,
and
I didn't realize that. Okay.
yeah, so it was probably within the first year of the detransition that I came to Christ, and so
Sure.
and then she was a friend. I'd known her for a while as Laura. She knew my wife now knew me as Laura first,
Oh, okay, sure.
and she didn't know what particularly was going on at first until we had that discussion. But so yeah, I came to Christ before we got married because she's a believer. She wasn't going to have
She wasn't
anybody in
married.
her life that wasn't a Christian. So
Good on her. Now you're well yoked.
there you go.
Well, that's good. So, did you find that because obviously you have reality hit you when you were working or when you were studying the psychology elements of everything you've come to know now as sort of the leader in the transgender regret movement. So your reality had already hit, but do you find that your faith in Christ, do you find that biblically speaking, everything backs it up?
Well, not only biblically speaking, but biologically speaking and
Oh, of course.
scientifically speaking. I mean, in every way, shape, and form, the things that I talk about are backed up. You can't. Well,
Dispute
I shouldn't say you can't ignore them or deny them. Everybody does if they don't want to
it.
deal with them.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, the people who do accept them and understand them to be true find their way back to restoration and recovery, and those are the people that I work with, and they find, I'm working with a guy right now who's married, and his life's been restored. He's back with his kids, and
Oh, that's
so these,
amazing.
yeah, no, it happens quite a bit. And many of the people who want to detransition are afraid that they're never going to find their love again, and the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of wonderful ladies out there that are willing to to take on a recovering transgender, regardless of what's happened to them. So,
Mm.
they need to understand that it's okay to have made a mistake. It's okay because we know the doctors are pushing these surgeries. We know they're pushing hormones, and we know that they're not doing good, proper pre-surgical evaluations. So mistakes are going to be made, and we need to find a suitable place for these people to return to their life as they
Yeah.
were before the surgeon got a hold of them and ruined them.
It's very sad that we've lost objectivity in every sense. It should be okay for someone to say, I was once gay, but I'm no longer gay. I found Christ, and actually, I don't want to live in the homosexual lifestyle. You don't hear those stories though, because they are buried in leftism and mainstream media. So you don't hear them. You have to go to YouTube. You have to go to the internet to find these stories. And it's the same with the transgender community. They bury those stories. They get so angry. Because
Mm-hmm.
they really want to promote their lifestyle as something it's glorified, and it really shouldn't be. Yeah, do you find that? Obviously you do, but I just want to hear your.
Yeah, yeah, no, I was sitting here thinking, I think you must have my brain because you're sounding just like me.
We're twins. Maybe I'm you.
Because
Should I identify as
yeah,
Walt
yeah,
Heyer?
there you go. But yeah, I mean, yeah, when they start plastering Bruce Jenner all over the cover of a
Mm,
magazine and saying that he's
yeah,
Caitlyn Jenner, that's the glorification, isn't it? And
it really is. It's sad. I used to like him. He was actually one of my favorites because he was the most normal. I was
yeah,
off.
well,
I was off by a mile.
yeah, well, he's not quite normal.
No, definitely not. I have a feeling in my head and heart because he knows the Lord, or at least he claims to have known. I think anyone who has some sort of a Christian foundation will end up regretting their transition. Now, I'm just speculating from nothing. I don't know, but I feel like one day he's going to regret it because he has done the bottom surgery. He's done it all. The only thing that he retains is the masculinity of his voice. So it's sort of not.
Well, and
the picture's not there.
He retains the masculinity of his walk. He walks like a truck driver. I mean, I've seen
He walks with a basketball under his arms.
Oh my gosh! It's like, come on, man! If with all your millions, you ought to at least get some training in how to walk. For gosh sake, it becomes pretty obvious. I mean, he's like a lumberjack going up there in a dress.
I would agree. I can't remember what I was going to say. I'll just say something else. We're almost done, by the way. With the whole culture shift that's happening at the moment and one's glorification that is happening with transgenderism, do you think that at some point the media and objectivity could return and that, people will start advertising stories of people who have changed back? Because people need to hear that. People need to know that it's a thing and that, you're assisting people in changing back.
Yeah, I do. And I'll tell you why, because I've studied how this works. And back in the early 1900s, they had a doctor who was, using surgery to try to cure psychological and emotional problems, by taking out people's spleens. And he went through all this. He did this for years, and he was celebrated by the New York Times as the greatest expert in cures and so forth. They elevated him, elevated his procedure. And then people began to look into it and see that about 40% of the people he was doing surgery on died. And then right after that, so it wasn't good. So right after that, then you had Dr. Freeman, who was doing frontal lobotomy starting in the 30s. And he was celebrated and elevated and cheered by the Times and all the other media. And then they started looking into that and found out that 40% of the people that he had worked on were dying. And he even said, well, at least we can count them as a success because they're not suffering anymore.
So then Jesus.
So now we look at the transgender community and we see that 40% of them are reported to attempt. Right. So here we are. There's a pattern to this where people are trying to cure psychological issues with surgery has been going on since the early 1900s. And I wrote about it in my book, Paper Genders, and documented the story. So, there's a tremendous history behind this that supports the fact that these surgeries, someday the same thing's going to happen to the people who are doing frontal lobotomies, and you don't see them doing it anymore. They realized it didn't work. It was killing people. Same thing's happening today. For 40 years, people have been needlessly dying from suicide because these surgeons start carving them up and cutting body parts off and stuffing them full of powerful steroids they call hormones. And there's nothing safe about it. It causes cancer. It causes emotional and psychological difficulties, and it directly causes them to attempt and commit suicide. That's just the fact.
Yeah, well, Patricia Arquette, I think is her name, had a transgendered sister who recently died and who claimed it was, she didn't say she regretted it necessarily, but she said something, I think I saw it on your website, where Patricia Arquette,
Yeah, she said it was. She said the whole transgender thing is BS, except she used
That's
the word.
right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
And so she said, and she was a poster child for the LGBT, but the LGBT would not talk about the fact that she had regretted doing it and had going back to being Robert. And, fine, as long as Alexis Arquette was being the poster child, they were all for Alexis. But when Alexis said, this is all nothing but BS, nobody changes genders, this is absolute nonsense, she just went on a rage about how foolish it was and went back to being Robert, just like I did in my life, except, because that was the poster child. They've been very careful about blasting this gal who now is dead from AIDS.
It's very sad. I remember the question I was going to ask you before. So I find that in society today, there is a great, it's definitely not a Christian thought. It's a sentiment that is very much liberalistic in nature, and it's basically that you do you, look out for you. You know, think about yourself. That you know, the truth shall set you free, so to speak. But it's completely been twisted because you know, if you happen to be married to a woman and you are a man and you have 3 children, then you transition and you become a female. That dynamic, that family dynamic, is being ruined because of an internal desire that you want to fulfill. So, and then in addition to that, the parent demands that their child use the right pronouns and gets offended at their kids if they don't use the right pronouns. And obviously, I'm generalizing. I know not all. I know Caitlyn Jenner said the kids can still call me dad, so that was nice. But my point is that from what I see on Oprah and on TV, we're all being encouraged to live our full selves and not to think about others. So if we're supposed to live our full selves, does that mean that, you know, every time I have a desire to hold a baby and I think in my head, I wonder what would happen if I dropped the baby? Should I just drop that baby? Like those sorts. That's just a bad example. But like,
well, you know, you're talking about living yourself out. You know, it's like fool's gold. I mean, they aren't living themselves out. They're living out somebody else. They're not being themselves. They're being. No. I mean, that's just total baloney. And when you talk about,
they're ruining their family life, they're ruining their children.
Yeah, it's a huge betrayal, and I did that to my children. And that is why I talk about regret. No one should go through this to satisfy your own feelings at the peril of others who will suffer because of your absolute stupidity and self-centered desires.
I would agree, but in terms of your children, is there a relationship to now? Are you friends again?
Oh yeah, we're friends, but you know, the truth is they will suffer for the rest of their life because of what I did. And so for that, I have deep regret. You can't avoid hurting the children when a parent does something so absolutely idiotic, stupid, and foolish as to claim to have changed genders when the truth is you didn't. There's something deeply wrong with that person that needs psychological help. And that's what I needed. That's what every single transgender needs that I'm aware of, that I work with. Every one of them can identify to me when and what caused them to be transgender. And it wasn't that they were born that way, as something else had happened. And that's why I wrote the book.
Can I ask what that was like when you came back? Was it a very teary moment? What, like, did they say, "It's okay, Dad, I love you, I'm glad you're back"? Like,
yes, yeah, that's exactly right. My daughter said, "You're my hero," and my son was glad. You know, because people appreciate the fact that people are in a terrible place. All of us get there at some point in time, but I don't think any of us want to see people stuck in that terrible place.
No.
And being a transgender is really not a fun thing. It's not a good thing. It's blown completely out of proportion.
It looks fun.
Yeah, right. It looks real glamorous, but I guarantee you that even Jenner has those quiet times where Jenner has some words of personal regret in silence.
I think that's what will happen. There'll be regret there, but it'll never be stated out loud.
Yeah, he'll wake up someday from the hangover and go, "What in the world did I do?" And it might be 10 or 15 years from now, but it'll happen. So yeah, it's a shame that people become so self-centered, so narcissistic, and so caught up in their own thing that they're willing to destroy the lives of others just for their own satisfaction and feelings.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, thank you so much for coming on my channel. I really do appreciate it. It was very kind of you to put time out of your busy day to talk to me and the Aussies. It's very nice of you.
I love the Aussies. I love the flat whites.
I do? I'm not a coffee person. I'm a chai latte person.
Oh, yeah. I'm a latte flat white person, Aussie style, all day long.
Oh, yeah. We're known for our coffees. Have you been to Melbourne?
No. Sydney.
Well, you got to come to Melbourne someday.
Give me a ticket.
I don't have any money, but I identify as rich.
All right. I'll identify as rich and we'll both talk by phone.